Hello, I'm Dr. Meena Nair from Malia College, Mumbai. Welcome viewers to the sixth academic session of our action-oriented Global Tipping Point Summit. We're delighted to see participants from various parts of India and from other countries as well. We'd also be very delighted if you could participate by typing questions in the chat box. This summit has been conceptualized by the dynamic education futurist, TEDx speaker, internationally acclaimed educator, and storyteller, Dr. Kumi S. Vivina. In October 2016, Dr. Vivina retired as professor and head of the Department of English, University of Mumbai, India. Dr. Vivina has two PhD degrees to her credit, one in literature and the other in education. She has published 11 books and 58 papers in peer-reviewed national and international journals and critical anthologies. She has won numerous national and international awards. In 2013, her book on education, Sourceful Intelligence, was selected as among the 18 best books published in the USA. And her most recent book, What Children Really Want, has received critical acclaim from educators, psychologists, parents, writers from all over the world. In 2015, she was selected by the world leaders in education as among the 35 women from across the world changing educational paradigms. Dr. Vivina has her own storytelling organization called Wordfully Yours, which hosts storytelling programs and conducts training workshops. I now invite Dr. Vivina to say a few words, after which we request you to do a short film on the summit. Over to you, Dr. Vivina. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nina. A summit of this magnitude cannot be managed alone. 108 people have been working tirelessly to make this summit possible. My sincere thanks to all the speakers, the change facilitators, the technical team, the design team, our core committee, and the advisory. So let me begin by thanking my advisory board members. Just give me a moment, please. Can you see my screen? Is my screen visible?
Not really, ma'am.
Okay, I'll just try again. A moment, please. Is it better?
Yes. Now, yes.
All right. A big thank you to all my advisory board members, comprising Dr. Firoza Godrej, Mr. Noshir Kurodi, Mr. Noshir Dadrawala, Mr. Sanjay Rastogi, Dr. Shehnaz Kama, Mrs. Devika Chatterjee, Ms. Raki Chabria, and Ms. Fiona Reynolds. A big thank you to the summit coordinator, Ms. Donna Reen. Ms. Donna Reen has been working tirelessly with me for over a year and a half now. A big thank you also to my core committee, once again comprising Mr. Yazdi Tantra, Ms. Deepa Soman, Mr. Milind Soman, Mr. Glenn Concessio, and Mr. Bhavin Shah. We have several companies which have partnered with us: Tata Trent, Tantra Tech, K-Merck, Lumiere Business Solutions, Education World, Parents World, Penn Ultimate, Teachers Help Teachers, First Moms Club, and Wolves. The short film you saw at the beginning of the program was arranged by Wolves. We have also received heartening endorsements from luminaries like the Dalai Lama. The Dalai Lama has written a long letter to us which reached us only a day prior to the commencement of the Global Tipping Point Summit. Allow me to read to you a short extract from His Holiness's letter. The Dalai Lama says, I am pleased to know about the Global Tipping Point Summit and its focus on improving the present educational system so that our younger generation can become more responsible citizens of our planet. Lieutenant General Shokin Chauhan, recipient of 5 Presidential Distinguished Service Awards, has also sent us his best wishes. Mr. Shamak Dava, internationally renowned choreographer and guru of contemporary dance in India. Cyrus Brocha, TV anchor, theater personality, comedian, political satirist, podcaster, and author. Shri M, a renowned educationist, a winner of the Padma Bhushan Award. Baman Irani, Indian theater and Bollywood actor, voice artist, and photographer. These are only some of the people who have been with us, but the entire group has been working in a true spirit of collaboration to make this entire summit possible. Thank you very much. Over to you, Nina. The online Global Tipping Point Summit from November this year to January 2021 is designed to explore paradigm shifts in education and parenting in an innovative way. Our aim is to create healthy learning and nurturing ecosystems by combining knowledge with self-awareness and wisdom to transform our lack-based consciousness into one rooted in abundance. Who will be attending the summit? Policymakers and education board authorities, principals, teachers, college and university professors, parents, caregivers, librarians, counselors, students, and anyone who's interested in education and parenting. What do we do differently? We have world-class visionaries and thought leaders as speakers who will expound their ideas and point the way in the right direction. They will be supported by far in the belly change facilitators who will suggest effective and practical ways of implementing the ideas of the speakers. At the online summit, participants will be invited to form action groups in the areas of their choice and to create the change they wish to see in the world. By 2025, we hope to reach out to as many people as possible through face-to-face and online talks and workshops. Come, be a part of the change. For more details on the summit, please visit our website www.gtps4change.org. See you there.
Thank you, ma'am. It is with great pleasure that we welcome our speaker for the day, Ms. Mahera Goel. She sees herself as a person with a healthy mix of compassion and curiosity, an alumni of the Harvard Graduate School of Education, where she pursued a master's in school leadership. Her goals are synonymous with the institution's mission. As an educational administrator and leader, her passion is to promote student voice, choice, and achievement, and the growth of professional learning communities with a collaborative vision that makes powerful teaching and learning the central focus of schooling. A Mumbai University graduate topper with a bachelor's and a master's in education, she is currently the principal of the early and primary school at Fazlani International School, an IB World School in Mumbai. Her professional journey of 15 years with teaching and learning while playing diverse roles as a classroom teacher, teacher leader, instructional coach, IB Primary Years Program Coordinator, and Head of Learning and Teaching at PYP, has helped her seek ways to further personalize learning and to deepen the relationships that sustain schools and students. She was invited by the IB Educator Network to train as a school inspection team leader, workshop leader, and PYP consultant to schools in the Asia Pacific region. She was elected as the first chairperson of the PYP Mumbai network of schools and a member of the SAIPSA Executive Committee, that is, the South Asia International Baccalaureate Schools Association, providing an opportunity to lead and mentor a network of educators and leadership teams in India, Singapore, Thailand, China, Australia, and the United States of America. She has been recently elected as the vice chair of the IB Heads Association for the West Zone. She has been an eminent speaker at the ECA, SIBSA, and IBO conferences and meets. She's also been the recipient of several school awards. Welcome, Ms. Goel, and over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Nina. And good evening. I'm just going to share my screen. Thank you for being here on a Sunday evening. Surely speaks that you're very passionate about early and primary years and also about social emotional learning. Just give me a minute to share my screen. It's great, everybody. Let's begin with weaving the social emotional learning quilt in the early and primary years. You must be wondering why I use the word quilt. Firstly, I love quilts ever since I've been a child. I also like them for their colors, their shapes, the embroidery, and I use the metaphor quilt for social emotional learning because the skills are diverse and unique like each piece in the quilt, but only when they are woven together that they evoke a pattern of thought leading to wellness for children and the stakeholders at a school. Well, I always say this, that if somebody ever had to write my blog, it wouldn't be one. And I'm grateful for all the people who have been part of my professional journey. My journey of accomplishment or story of accomplishment and change is due to the professional learning network and the growing tribe that share a common vision, be it the IBO Professional Learning Network, which I've worked with for the last almost 16 years, or my colleagues at Harvard, who I found a year ago, or my school peers, and of course, my students and parents who have been with me over the last 14 years. When we unite people behind a common goal, it all comes together. And I'm hoping that this project will be another collaborative narrative to share. So, why are we all here today? Well, this session is to inspire you to new ideas, or for that matter, even agitate you to try and think of things you may have not considered. I hope it can find a voice that aligns with some of your thoughts, because social emotional learning is not new. It has existed in our values and also in alternative pedagogies. But there is a growing need to pen new theories of action that puts it into policy and practice. And when I talk about inspire, I also talk about inspiring children. We are sailing at a time when the only constant in education is change, and we educators need to be those change agents. We understand pedagogy inside out, but if we are unable to define why someone should do something different in their practice, all of that knowledge is wasted. So thank you, Dr. Kumi, for adding that one more why for me being here today. So SEL is all about human interaction, and I'm hoping I can make this a little interactive and social in spite of the limited time frame. So let us begin with a short engagement. What you see here is a range of stones with different expressions. Let's begin by checking in. What is your story today? What I need you to do is put in the chat box which stone represents how you're feeling. So is it happy? You just put the words happy or sad or anxious. Which stone is you on the outside or the inside? Which stone would you like to be? And usually I would say this to children. Would it help if you keep a stone in your pocket to remind you of the feelings that you're feeling? or want to be the person you want to be today? So let's take around 30 seconds and add to the chat box. And my timer begins now. Wow, it's good to see such a happy community here. Relaxed, happy, contented, peaceful. Awesome. Thank you, everybody, for sharing that. So, why did we do this today? Well, everybody's talking about putting Maslow before Bloom these days. So, let's put connection before content. Is this how your day begins with your students? How do you currently prepare yourself so that you take time to start the day with some self care and mindset work to help in setting a tone of how you would like to show up throughout the day towards your students when you know how they are feeling? So let's move on to something else that is really important. Think of a time when you were in school, or think today, wherever you are. What do you think are the ingredients for a great place to teach and learn? Please put those little ingredients in the chat box. It could be a word, it could be a sentence. And let's take 30 seconds to do this too. Okay, safety, freedom, smiles, curiosity, positive attitude, safe environment, togetherness, willingness. Wow, I wish I was in a physical space doing this workshop. That would be a lot of fun. Okay. Now I'm going to tell you to do something interesting. Hold on to that word. If I were to put up two sticky notes on our virtual classroom right now, one is IQ and the other is social emotional quotient, where do you think you would put your sticky note or your ingredient? Well, there is no one right answer. Most notes would fall in middle, right? Whether a lot of people wrote play or emotions or teachers or just co-curricular activities. But let's dig a little into research. This was done by a global nonprofit organization called 6 Seconds, and they identified 5 essential things. Do you see an overlap between your ideas and this sticky note? These are the ingredients that young people need to thrive in the world of tomorrow. But let's think, how do children get these ingredients? Although today schools are moving towards student agency, learning in a K-12 classroom is typically dictated by people other than the learner. But outside the classroom, learning is typically driven by the learner's interest, curiosity, and intrigue. If we want to develop lifelong learners, then we need to put these epistemic emotions back where they belong, central to the learning process and the experiences that learners have in school. I was also delighted to see that the Dalai Lama letter that Kumi just shared stated the need for SEL and its impact. In such schools, learners are encouraged to self-regulate and develop awareness of their affective and cognitive needs. So let's quickly jump in. What are going to be our guiding questions for today? What is social emotional learning? What are some of the core competencies? Why social emotional learning? And how can schools promote, which leads us to our action project, which is advancing SEL teacher communities. So let's think for a moment. And I take this from Reggio Emilia. What are your hopes and dreams for the students in your community? The Reggio Emilia approach always asks, what is your vision of the learner? All pedagogy has central tenets about learners, who learners are, and what they're capable of. And I echo what Shaheen Mystery said in her presentation, and that keeps her awake. Are we sharing the power with our students in our classrooms? So as you hold on to that thought, let me define for you what is social emotional learning. As I read this definition, I want you to either select a word or phrase and put it in the chat box if you like, which resonates with you. If you're familiar already with this definition, then think how you would change it or redefine it. What would you like to add? The process through which children and adults acquire and effectively apply the knowledge, attitudes, and skills necessary to understand and manage emotions, set and achieve positive goals, feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain positive relationships, and make responsible decisions. Now that you know what is the definition of SEL, I want you to pause and reflect. How do your thoughts go back to your vision of the learner? How does it go back to that ingredient that you put in? Does it reflect also in your practice? And pause and reflect is so important in our classrooms. How many times do we really give children opportunities to do this? Now that you've been able to reflect a bit, let's move ahead. Let's talk about the 5 competencies of SEL. For this presentation, I will be using the CASTLE, that's the Collaborative for Academic, Social and Emotional Learning Framework that fosters knowledge, skills and attitudes across the areas of competence and multiple key settings to establish equitable learning environments that advance students' learning and development. There are many different conceptual frameworks out there, and there are different research questions and different intervention approaches. But for today's presentation and our action project, we are going to use the CASTLE framework. So let's talk about self-awareness. That's our first component. Self-awareness enables students to recognize the impact of emotions and thoughts on behavior. It includes assessing strengths and weaknesses accurately, leading to a well-grounded sense of confidence and optimism. So let's quickly do a fun learning engagement. Let's do a feelings tour. Okay, what do we need to do in this tour? What we're going to do is we're going to take a walk through your school building or workplace and attend to the feelings you have. Not a real walk, it's a symbolic one. By doing so, you will learn a lot about the culture and the climate of your school and some areas where action is needed. So let's begin the walk. Close your eyes and picture yourself arriving at school, walking in and moving from place to place over the course of a typical day. Pay attention to the entranceways, what you see on the walls, the furniture and how it's arranged. How welcome is it? How welcoming is it? Look in on classes, the lunch and recess times, hallways, staircases, and other wings if you have them in your building, meetings, co-curricular activities, after school and evening events. The entire gamut of what occurs in a regular school day. Finally, imagine yourself preparing to leave and depart. And then open your eyes. Now ask yourself some of these questions. Where and when do you experience positive emotions such as pride, joy, and excitement? Was it your classroom? Was it the ground? Where and when do you experience negative emotions such as anxiety, frustration, anger? Where do you experience both? Where do you detect harassment, bullying? And where do you see the most student peer-to-peer or adult to student and adult to adult support? what is happening in these places to cause these emotions? And I'm going to leave you with that thought. And I'd really encourage you to try this definitely if you haven't been able to do it at this moment, and see where the action is needed at your school. Another example of self-awareness is also knowing emotions. How often do we give students an opportunity to talk about feelings beyond happy and sad and build an emotional vocabulary? This is an excellent story, if you've not used it, called The Color Monster, where every monster has a certain feeling attached to the monster. And as I read the story, and after that, the students used buttons of the same color and added it to the jars, sharing their whys of how they're feeling today. After which, we did a little emo meter in the class and realized what the class is looking like today. Is everybody feeling loved? Everybody feeling happy? If there is a negative emotion, then it's a trigger for you to look up that child. And of course, we have a little mirror in school where students go and stand and maybe share their emotions. Let's move to the next competence, self-management. So what is self-management? Self-management is the ability to regulate these emotions, thoughts, and behaviors, different situations. So if you attended the session yesterday, one of the ways of doing so would be practice mindfulness. And I think for children, we need to make it fun, right? Breathe in, breathe out is like something like blowing a balloon or inflating it and deflating it. I also liked using this mind jar, I remember, when my daughter was small. And you fill the jar with glitter. And every time, one is disturbed or gets angry, you shake up the jar. And then you realize that's exactly how your mind is, twirling with lots and lots of thoughts. And then you count till 5 or 10 and slowly see the glitter settle down, and it should calm you down. So it's a great practice to do with children. So these are some of the strategies you'll learn as part of our action project. Another very important thing when it comes to self-management is routines and norms. How important they are to be taught, modeled, and established in the classroom, because children know exactly what's expected and how to do certain things. And having these predictable patterns in place allows them to spend more time with meaningful instruction. What you see here is a visual timetable. So children know exactly what's coming on next, and you can keep changing pictures if you change the timetable. Another is essential agreements, which we do at school in our classrooms, where children come up with their rules. And it's called collaborative rules. Instead of telling kids what your rules are, which encourages defiance rather than obedience, have the kids make the rules. So routines and norms is another way for self-management. Next competence, social awareness. Social awareness is so important in today's world. It's actually learning to respect diversity and also certain social and ethical forms of behavior. Often you may visit a school which is different from you and has specially abled students. And I remember a parent once telling the child that your classmate is on a wheelchair because a part of her body does not work. But what she did was, she also told the student, I notice that Sheila smiles and brings joy in your classroom too. And even though she's different from you, she may have some things in common. Why don't you try and be a friend? So it's our responsibility as teachers and leaders and parents to bring about this open-mindedness. I remember grade 2 doing a unit on signs and symbols, and having visited various schools, they came back and said we want to do a mime kitchen, where they set up a restaurant and invited parents, and the menu and everything was where parents actually modeled sign language, which was very neatly put down in the posters that were arranged in the classroom. After which we heard some very interesting stories from parents about empathy and how challenging it was for them to even order through sign language. Next, relationships, so important, are needed to establish healthy connections. And that would mean communicating clearly, listening actively, and also cooperating and negotiating conflict, which we see in most schools. This was a very interesting exercise. So the 4-year-olds at school were doing a unit on community helpers, and they put together all the departments, or you would say all people who help us at school. And they did this exercise, and they said, if you even remove one person, the entire pyramid crumbles. So important to develop teamwork and collaborative problem solving. The grade 5 students in their exhibition actually put out something which is being a bully or a buddy. Who are you? That way, reinforcing standing up for the rights of others, communicating and resolving conflicts. And of course, empathy x-rays were part of that project. Another important thing is modeling culturally responsive teaching. Having so many languages at school, we often do a lot of cultural assemblies by teacher appreciating every language. A good check to see if you're doing culturally responsive teaching is to see that you integrate everybody's cultures and identity in your classroom. Maybe take a quick inventory of the books in your classroom. Do they include authors of diverse races and communities? Let's move on then to decision making, which is our last component and so very important. Giving students a voice and a choice. So just sharing a few examples. Engaging students in school to assess the school. How often do we ask students to really do surveys and a feedback on the school? And then let them use these observations and pen research questions and feedback to draw conclusion on what's going right and what could be improved and how they could help. Consider young people as stakeholders and partners in their schools. This was done by one of the grades where they actually used Lego and they made the schools that they'd like to see in the future, the way the playground should be, where should be, how a classroom should look like. This really works when school leaders set new goals or make major decisions to expect students to contribute. Another important thing is include authentic student representation on leadership teams. And that's our student council. So it's important to probably have kids be on diversity teams and in leadership teams, and not just to observe, but also to take part. And of course, invite students, give them a voice and choice. In a physical space, there were weeks when we often gave them a day to make their own schedules and timetable. And very important is to finally solicit student feedback. Ask students how they feel about the content and structure of classes and for suggestions on school policies and culture and climate. It's challenging, not easy, but it can be done. I recently had grade 3 actually do a choice board on social emotional health in a virtual classroom, and kids could now pick any one thing that they'd like to do within this choice board. So again, giving students a choice because we all are different. Let's move on now quickly to why SEL and what does research say? So if you realize and through the competencies, you will see definitely improved attitudes, a positive classroom behavior, and a reduction in conduct issues and stress. What do employers say? And this research has been done again by Castle. Today's life and work environments require more than just thinking skills and content knowledge. 21st century leadership requires self-awareness, authenticity, empathy, and the ability to self-manage emotions, especially in conflict during crisis and pressure. Are our kids ready for that? And finally, of course, the teachers who are at the front lines and are best situated to enhance students' social emotional competence. So let's take a couple of seconds to reflect back on those competencies. I used to think this was SEL, but now I think, does it reflect in my practice? Moving on. Now to our action project. Advancing teacher SEL communities. What are we looking for? And how do we promote? Well, in this action project, we are looking for teacher SEL ambassadors. And we will learn why SEL is so essential for students and educators, how they can leverage them, and the strategy to scale the development of these skills across teacher communities. But let's think for a minute. Are you the one we are looking for? Let's take a quick assessment. I'm going to put up some statements here, and you're going to think about a child or a student that you know and rate these sentences, keeping that child in mind on a score of 1 to 5. Are we ready? I can name my feelings. Can calm down when I need. When I feel stuck, I can find new options. I can help my friends feel better. When I need to, I know how to get help. Now think, where is this child now and what's the effect of that skill or the current level of skill? What would happen if more children were able to rate a 4 or a 5 on these? And if you think you marked the child that you know, maybe 1, 2, or 3, then you're somebody we're looking for. Does SEL look like this in your classroom? A supportive classroom environment, explicit SEL instruction, and integration of SEL practices in your daily instruction. If not, then you're somebody we are looking for. Let's talk about explicit and implicit skills. As in any subject area, there are 2 parts, explicit and implicit. The explicit comes from formal lessons, from the instruction that we deliver, but the implicit comes from student experience and the climate of your school, their home. And this is from unintended instruction, from their observations and the way we interact. All teachers know the students are always watching. Are we watching? Let's start to notice and wonder. Emotions are always present. Are you noticing them? Are you using them carefully? If not, you need to join us. This is a process for school-wide SEL, which is put out by Castle. For us, the 2 boxes that you see in pink become very, very important. That is strengthening adults, because if we don't feel that way, we are not going to be able to promote social emotional learning with our students. I'd love to talk about this model, and I'd say, are you Permalacious? This is a model of well-being which was actually coined by a psychologist called Martin Seligman in his book Flourish. It talks about positive psychology, but here we're going to think about how do we really cultivate and strengthen this in our children. So are you somebody? Does your classroom create positive emotions? And what do you mean by positive emotion? It means something actually laying out or planning strategies which makes kids stretch their imagination. Engagement. Do the learning experiences in your class create a flow? And when I say flow, it means that the kids are engaged when they're doing a puzzle or music or dance or even play. Does your classroom nurture positive peer culture? Do you sensitize students to service that goes beyond the self? Whether it's donating books or delivering presents to an old age home. And finally, do you practice SMART goals? If you are Permalacious, we are looking for you too. What are going to be our learning intentions in the project? Well, always begin with a why. So you will gain the knowledge you need to intentionally build an SEL foundation for your students. Respond rather than react. And finally, transform your mindset, even in the most challenging situations. We'll pack you off with an SEL toolkit. What's in our toolkit? Well, there's something for every stakeholder. Align the school climate programs and practice to promote SEL. We're going to put in SEL for sustainable goals because I know a lot of schools are doing that. Strategies to integrate SEL. And finally, without authentic family partnerships at home, we won't be able to get with SEL where we want to. So, what are you waiting for? Are you going to just react and go home after this presentation? Or you are going to respond? You're going to join us as an SEL ambassador because when you join, a lot of children will thrive, schools will win, families will bond, workplaces will benefit, and overall society will strengthen. And I'm really excited to share this that we already have one partner school who is going to be our experimental school, and that's the Pathak Technical High School and College. Their teachers from the K-12 early and elementary school have been talking to us over the last couple of months. Many of their students are first-time learners. They come from a socially economic weaker background. But it's absolutely amazing to see these teachers still use very innovative teaching methods like Playway or KidSmart. And what attracted us to them was the Pathak Life Skills Foundation. And we are really excited because this means we are going to be sharing ideas and not just giving them ideas. So thank you, Pathak High School, for joining us for this project already. And yes, I leave you with this thought. And I know a lot of schools are getting performance-based. But I can tell you that data can only tell us a little. It does not necessarily move people forward in a positive direction. Evidence to inform practice is important, but stories are what move people forward. Stories touch the heart. What is the story of your classroom or school? Not only the one you can tell, but the one you want to create with us together. On that note, I will say this will be continued with our change facilitators coming on next to talk to you more about each competence. Twisha, when I read the definition the first time to her, found her calling in self-awareness and self-management. Mansi said, I want to do responsible decision-making. Chaitali enjoys talking about relationship skills. And finally, I have Abhilasha, who's going to talk about social awareness. They're all teachers, educators, just like you, who are out there wanting to make a difference. On that note, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Kumi. Hand it back over to you.
Thank you, Mahera. That was a wow presentation. So much of matter packed in such an interesting way. I really do not want to stand between you and the change facilitators, but I need to say something. I only wish I was your student. It all sounds like fun. Co-creating education sounds like fun, and really no child would be left out in that way. So thank you very much, Mahera, for a brilliant presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Kumi.
With that, I would like to acquaint the online audience very briefly with the structure of this summit. This summit is intended to be different from the workshops and seminars that we've been attending. We have a speaker. You just heard Mahera speak for 25 minutes or so. We have a speaker who presents a core concept, a major idea. Change facilitators whom she has named in every group have been working with these speakers over months to come up with some interesting mini project. 4 aspects of that project are taken up by the 4 change facilitators who acquaint the audience with the specific area in which they will be providing training. And we invite the online participants to sign Google Forms, which are on our website, and ask to be members of the action group. Each change facilitator has developed a teaching module of 3 hours. You have 4 change facilitators, so it's 12 hours of intensive learning. After that, the action group members go out into the world, create their own groups, and try out the methods and ideas proposed by the change facilitators. And they try to bring about visible change. At the end of the year, they present an impact project report and tell us the kind of wonderful work that they've done. We hope that we can create a white paper at the end of that 1 year and inform the government of the changes that these wonderful people have accomplished. So I know, be the change to see the change is almost a cliche, but come along, sign Google Forms and become a part of this dynamic action group. Thank you very much. Over to you, Nina.
Thank you, ma'am. It is my pleasure to welcome the 4 change facilitators that Ms. Mahera has spoken about. It's also my pleasure to tell you a little bit more about them. Our first change facilitator is Ms. Twisha Luthria. She's a special needs educator at Paslani International School. She graduated from the SMDT University with a B.Ed in special education. She strives to work on the holistic development of children, equipping them with skills for daily living. Her goal has always been inclusion, and she believes there's no such thing as the right moment to make a difference. Welcome, Ms. Luthria, and over to you.
Thank you, Ms. Nair. Well, good evening to everyone. It is my pleasure to be a part of this inspiring group under the guidance of Ms. Kumi and Ms. Mahera. Well, this topic is very, very close to my heart. And as a change facilitator, I have the opportunity to help bring a change and make a difference. I am so thankful to have this come my way. To begin with, I'm going to start with a quote that resonates with me when I think about SEL. Educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all, like Aristotle very rightly said. We know that when kids have strong social and emotional learning skills, they are better able to perform academically, deal with conflict, make informed decisions, achieve goals, and have better life outcomes. As adults, everything that we do depends on how we are feeling, and the same applies to kids. I cannot get a child to learn if they are not emotionally or socially ready. Well, just as you, when Ms. Mahira showed us the definition of SEL, and like she said, the one thing that stood out for me in the entire definition was managing emotions. And so I'm here to talk about self-management. However, I believe that, while all components are linked, self-awareness and self-management go hand in hand. So let's look at both of these together. Well, simply put, self-awareness is my ability to identify and label my emotions while also understanding my strengths and needs. Self-management, on the other hand, is my ability to act on these emotions. It is not about controlling emotions, but rather learning how to use them wisely. I thought this was a great example of self-awareness and self-management. We all know this man. He has won India a lot of recognition. And we all know the pressure on a leader who is leading a team. All eyes are on you. Um, feeling anxious, feeling nervous before a game is normal, right? So when he probably feels anxious, when he feels nervous, that's self-awareness. But what do I do with these feelings is what matters. Am I going to succumb to the pressure or rise to the challenge? Like Ms. Mahira mentioned, am I going to react or am I going to respond? And hence, there is a reason why this man is called Captain Cool. Well, let me ask you, let's take a few moments to think about how this year has been for you, the year 2020, right? How have you felt? What have your feelings been like? Have you felt bored? Have you felt happy? Have you felt confused about everything that's happening? Have you been frustrated, not being able to go to school, not being able to see your kids? Have you not known how to manage your emotions? That is your self-awareness. Um, have you what have you done about these feelings? When you were feeling bored, did you engage in some form of physical activity? Did you hone some skills, or did you just decide to rest it out? um, you know Having an action plan to your emotion is your self management, right? So what you decided to do with all of that information. As educators, if we felt lost, imagine how it must have been for our kids. We may have coping mechanisms to turn our emotions into positive actions. And I feel that this is something that we also need to equip our kids with. Well, as a special educator, my aim is to create an inclusive setup. Some of the kids I work with struggle to even identify what they're feeling, let alone manage those feelings. I have worked with kids who walk into school having a bad day, and it is up to me to turn their day around. I've also had kids who only want someone to lend them a listening ear. But we often start our day by asking our kids how they are feeling, but rarely do we focus on these emotions. Rita Pearson here on the screen that you see, an extremely inspiring educator, talks about the power of connection, and she lays a lot of emphasis on it. Now more than ever, in the wake of the current pandemic, it has become important to work on these social and emotional skills. SEL, I believe, plays a very big role in making our classrooms inclusive. So if you're looking to make your classroom inclusive, if you're looking for tools and strategies, come join us. Well, and now I'm just going to end with the last slide by asking you, from everything that you've heard Ms. Mahira talk about, I think I have felt motivated. I have wanted to make a change. Have you felt that? I'm being able to say this, and that's my self awareness. So if you felt all of this, if your answer is yes, well, what are you going to do about it? One of the things that you can do is be a part of our action project, and that's going to be your self management for feeling so motivated and so inspired, right? So sign up for our action project and be a teacher, SEL ambassador with us. Let's create that change. Let's create that difference. Um, Thank you so much. And I now hand over to my colleague, Ms. Mansi, to take over.
Thank you, Ms. Twisha. Um, I would want I would want all of y'all to now look at the image which is going to be on the screen. So, what should a kid select? A cake or an apple? There's no wrong answer or there's no right answer to this. If it is a Sunday, maybe he's allowed to eat a cake. But if it's a weekday, it may be an apple. It all depends on what choice his parents want him to make. So today, I am going to discuss the responsible decision making. So there are 24 hours in a day, out of which 15 to 16 hours we are making decisions in our life. It could be as simple as whether should I brush my teeth today, should I have a bath, or as difficult as should I buy my car or a house. There is a decision making in every aspect of our life. Even a 3-year-old makes a decision every now and then. So we learn decision making very early in our life. You have made a responsible decision to attend this session today. We make decisions to make a favorable outcome. The outcome could be favorable, unfavorable, but our desired outcome has to be a favorable one. So I chose this topic to help others understand what is the right way to make a decision, what is a responsible way to make a decision. Because if this is embedded in them at a very early stage of life, it will teach students self awareness, as Ms. Trisha and Ms. Mahira were talking about, and how to consider
family, friends, and community, and the world. So let me share my experience with y'all. I have worked with one or two NGOs where I noticed that all the kids wait for each and every child to fill their plates for the meal. Once everyone's plates are filled and they're ready, then they all start to eat together. I sensed a responsibility. I sensed a responsible behavior here where they chose to wait for their family or friends and then started to eat their meal. And also, once my son broke a toy and chose to hide it from me. This was a reason for me to choose this topic as I want to prepare the children to respond in any situation in a way that demonstrates care and concern for themselves and others and do no harm. I want them to be prepared in decision making skills to think through their actions in advance and how they might affect others and the environment around them when we are not there to guide them. So, in social emotional learning, my focus is going to be responsible decision making. It teaches the children how to recognize and validate their emotions as well as to manage them properly. Responsible decision making involves critical thinking and self discipline. It also means knowing how to extrapolate the effects of the decisions on others. The process helps the students to learn relationship skills, empathy, and how to communicate effectively. Let me give you an example of my classroom. One of my students did not want to attend school as she was so scared that I'm going to yell at her for her incomplete homework. So I decided to sit with her and talk it out. And we identified what was the problem and how we could solve it. There were certain steps which were taught to her that how do we deal with the problem and try to make a responsible decision so that she could come and share her feelings with me. So if you are struggling and want to know or want to solve how to solve such situations, please join us. Let's be a responsible decision maker and make a responsible decision. Sign up for our action project and be a teacher SCL ambassador to know more strategies and on how to deal with such situations. So now I would like to hand it over to Ms. Chaitali, who will take it further.
Thank you, Mansi. A very good evening to everyone. Our speaker, Ms. Mahera, has explicitly spoken to us about social emotional learning, and so have Ms. Trisha and Ms. Mansi. As a change facilitator, it is my pleasure to share with all of you about my area of core competence. But before that, I'd like us to watch a short film which is about 1 minute 27 seconds. While you watch the film, make a note of the big words that pop up for you, that resonate for you. Can we now play the film, please?
What are emotions and how do they work? Emotions are often feared and avoided because they are so painful. So why focus on emotions? Because emotions give you important information and tell you whether things are going your way. Emotions help you to survive by providing an efficient, automatic way of responding rapidly to important situations. Emotions help you to relate to other people and the expectations and demands of life. Emotions tell you what you need. When you know what you need, you can take action to meet those needs. Emotions also communicate what you feel. You learn your emotional reactions through experience. All your negative experiences can turn into a big, black, and scary feeling inside. You learned many of your emotional reactions long ago. Your black shadow will therefore sometimes resemble a person who hurt you in the past. But your emotional experience and reactions can always be changed or altered.
Thank you. So, do you all agree that emotional reactions are learned through experiences? Do you also believe that emotional experiences and reactions can be changed and altered? But how? It is all about developing relationship skills. But how do we do that? How many of you feel that students get bothered by petty arguments, conflicts with their peers, or trying to match up with their expectations of their friends? They would be unable to understand each other's perspectives. There would be groupism and exclusion. So many of us would have noticed this in our classroom. We will all agree that this year has been very different for all of us, and most importantly, for our little learners. During regular physical school, learners would get a lot of opportunity to communicate, share their feelings, thoughts, talk to their peers, work in teams, and so on. But the online platform has its own limitations. Teachers had to remind students to keep muting themselves. Students missed being with their peers and working in groups. The little minds were anxious and overwhelmed with the situation at the same time. So I introduced stories in my class. I started reading out stories to them. Stories enable them to make connections, share their feelings, understand different perspectives, and develop communication skills. This is one of the strategies that help learners develop relationship skills. If you sign up for our action project, together we will explore and share many more strategies that will help our learners to effectively use their relationship skills. So be our teacher SEL ambassador today. When was the last time you enabled students to understand themselves, their feelings, and develop their skill sets? If you think this was a decade ago, it's time to upskill yourself. And you are at the right place at the right time to do that. Join us in our mission to bring about a change for a better tomorrow. Together, we can make a difference. Remember, it's the little conversations that build the relationships and make an impact on each student. By Sir Robert John Meehan. Thank you for listening to me. Over to Ms. Abhilasha now.
Hi everyone, good afternoon. Thank you so much to everyone who's here today to hear us talk. It's a very inspirational session, so I hope I can add my fair bit to it as well. So I'm Abhilasha Khetan. I am a first year teacher. I found my calling in education rather recently. Before this, I've worked in media, hospitality, and publication. Throughout all of these roles that I've held, one thing remained constant. Adults find it very difficult to empathize with those whom they deem different from oneself. So, the questions we need to ask ourselves are: how did we get here? And how can we move away from apathy towards empathy? The answer lies in social awareness, a competency of social and emotional learning. Mahera and the other change facilitators have gone in depth about this, so I'll stick to social awareness. It is the ability to understand and empathize with others, particularly people from different background than one's own. So, what does social awareness include in the classroom? It's about perspective taking, empathy, appreciating diversity, and having a respect for others. While these terms may seem daunting and utopian for teachers to include in the daily teaching and learning activities, there are several skills which can be implemented in our daily lives to develop social awareness. So let's have a look at what these skills are. Identifying social cues, both physical and verbal, taking others' perspectives, demonstrating empathy and compassion, showing concern for the feelings of others, understanding and expressing gratitude. recognizing strengths in others, recognizing situational demands and opportunities, identifying diverse social norms, including unjust ones, and caring about and being motivated to contribute to the well-being of us and everyone around us, including our community. How can we do this in our classrooms? The feelings board is a rather simple tool. It is a great tool to understand not just our emotions, but also to understand and gain insights into the emotions and well-being of another. Consider a scenario in which students A and B have walked into classroom and placed their pictures on the feelings board. Student A notices that student B has put their photo against a rather gloomy sky. What does this mean? And how can student A uplift the mood and well-being of student B? It can be little things like offering to share their lunch or including them in a game of football. It's not always about grand gestures. Another rather infamous debate is the herbivores versus carnivores. Two students are eating lunch. A opens their lunchbox and begins to relish a meal of grilled chickens and vegetables. B covers their nose and mouth and frowns. How does student A feel? Think of all the instances in our lives as adults that we have intentionally or unintentionally caused someone to feel inferior about their choices. A term I'd like to introduce here is allophilia. Todd Petinsky coined this term while he was looking for the word that meant the opposite of prejudice. Hence, the term allophilia was born. It means not just tolerating differences, not just accepting differences, but rather celebrating differences, appreciating them, and learning to make it a part of our lives. So that is allophilia, a genuine love of our differences and members of our group. Now I want you all to all use the chat box and write in the chat box the one word that comes to your mind when you see these 4 images. We have Harvey Weinstein, Idi Amin, Joseph Stalin, and Adolf Hitler. So I'm going to read some of the words from the chat box. Anything that comes to your mind. Fear, that's a very good one. We have fear, we have pride, strict, dictatorship. So those are some of the terms that you are associating with these. And many, many more. I think all of them are synonyms on the same lines. How about these 4 individuals? We have Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam, Martin Luther King Jr., Nelson Mandela, and Mother Teresa. Loving, caring, intelligence. Is anyone seeing the contrast that we have here? Yes. So now coming to this. Where do you see yourself? Is it in the first row or is it in the second row? If you had to make a decision for yourself, where do you see yourself? Yes, I think most of us see ourselves in the second one. If I were to ask someone very close to you where they see you, do you think there would be a connect in the way you see yourself versus how they see you? To sum up this, Maya Angelou said it best. I've learned that people will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. So the question I ask you is, how do you want to be remembered? Why should you join this action group and become our teacher SEL ambassadors? Well, our teaching learning process cannot exist in a vacuum of academics. It must include social awareness and the other SEL competencies. By doing so, we are actively changing the trajectory of our lives, which have come to include inferiority complexes, marginalization, bullying, assault and abuse, discrimination, and apathy towards those who are different from us. Reason number 2, maybe it's just time to let the old ways die and embrace the new. So I really look forward to seeing you all sign up for our action group and become teacher SEL ambassadors. Thank you so much, and I hand it back to Nina now.
Thank you. I'm sure our viewers are very curious to know more about the 3 change facilitators that we just heard. So we had Ms. Mansi Javeri. She's a PYP teacher for the past 9 years and finds it a thoroughly enriching experience. She believes that self-awareness, self-control, and interpersonal skills are keys for a child's success. She's really excited to be a part of the summit. I think we could all sense her excitement in her presentation and work towards sharing a meaningful experience with all stakeholders. We then heard Ms. Chaitali Shah. She is a passionate primary teacher working at the Yuba Ambani International School. She has always thrived to make teaching relevant and engaging. She feels the summit has given her an opportunity to spread this to a larger community and bring about a difference in the way teachers teach. She believes that educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all. We couldn't agree with you more. The last speaker that we heard just now was Ms. Abhilasha Ketan. She is a PYP homeroom teacher at Fazlani International School. She is a first-year teacher who found her calling for education while working with children at Disney World. A major component of her professional calling includes bringing educational equity and social emotional learning to the forefront. She believes that resilience, collaboration, and an unwavering commitment towards a better tomorrow can enable us to achieve an ideal education system. Thank you, Ms. Mansi, thank you, Ms. Chaitali, and thank you, Abhilasha. I would now request Dr. Kumi Bavaina and Ms. Donna Reen to host the Q&A session. Thank you. Over to you, Ms. Donna and
Thank you very much, Nina. We have a few interesting questions from the audience. So, Mahera, the change facilitators, anyone could take them. The first question that has come in is that despite our efforts to make teaching interactive, I really wonder if SEL can ever be genuinely taught online.
I think it's not about teaching online or offline. Social emotional learning is something that is a connect with children, and you can connect with them virtually too. If you look to some of the strategies that I shared, you can easily do them in class, whether it was the stone story or just checking in with their feelings every morning. And there are a host of other things that you can do as a station. If you're very familiar with tech, you can set up a station deck with Google Slides and put kids into breakout rooms and have them have a go with it. Again, enabling them to have a voice and choice. Or if you're good at Jamboard, you can have them put those stickies with their feelings. So very, very possible, and love to talk more, whoever it is, in another space. You can write, connect, and share. We're happy to share some strategies.
Thank you.
Okay. Mahera, this question to you. Why is that social emotional learning is now being taught when earlier it was intrinsically woven, like you said, the quilt into the education system?
Right. As I shared before, that this is not something new. I think let's go back to our old Gurukul system. It was all there. It was all holistic, and kids learn through their mentors and gurus. But I think over time, I think sometimes it's very important to give a name, and because only when there's a structure is it followed at school. So I think, and what has happened is over the years that education policy has been stuck in the manufacturing age, driving schools to turn out people to recite information and pass tests so they can work on a production line. But meanwhile, businesses have moved into information age. So to put it bluntly, education policy has not kept up with the 21st century requirements. And that's, if you see, empathy is now becoming so important. And a good example of that is Apple, where they really put in some solutions and made sure that even the manufacturers put themselves in the customer's shoes to know what is required.
There is another question here. The teacher is a teacher of higher education, and she says that though learner-centric conferences seem popular, We can't really try out learner-centric ways in the colleges where we teach. So is there any strategy to teach emotional and social intelligence at that level?
I don't think SEL is limited to any age. I think it can be taught at any level because if you looked at the core competencies, it can be just merged with the lessons you're doing. Like a simple unit which I shared with kids on signs and symbols, you can weave it into any of your subject lines. It's very important that we make kids now leaders, 21st century leaders, because we have to understand that they need to be collaborative. They will need to sell ideas to teams. They will need to listen. And moreover, they will need to understand others' perspectives. And this can easily be done with a lot and lot of strategies, even with the higher level kids. Because remember, once they move out, they will need to understand everybody's issues and concerns to come up with a win-win solution. So again, anything can be done at any level. And as when I was speaking, I was looking at SEL for sustainable goals. A lot of sustainable goals become part of subjects. So that is another way that you can actually go out there and give it a conceptual lens so that students are able to put in an action project together for that sustainable goal.
Great.
Okay, why do you think that the B.Ed course should include a subject like social emotional learning?
I'm so glad whoever asked this question. The idea, I remember when I first started speaking to Kumi and she called me and I gave her this and I said, I think my hope someday is that this is essential. It's mandatory for every teacher to have either a program or a course on SEL. Because without knowing feelings and emotions, as I said, if you looked at that well-being model, which is the PERMA model, without having that in you, you can't go to a classroom because today's classrooms are very different from the ones where we went to. And it's important that we understand our children because they are dealing with so much in the world outside. So I hope very much that all the B.Ed colleges that have turned into universities definitely put up a program, and we are happy to help.
And we have a last question here for you, and that is, does SEL make a difference to a child who comes from a troubled home? And there are more and more of these children today.
Absolutely. Would any of the change facilitators like to take this? Y'all are all in classrooms. Anybody would like to attempt this one? Well, I think that SEL is, yeah, Abhilasha, go ahead.
Yes. So, I just completed my B.Ed recently, and my internships took me to a myriad of schools where you had children who were homeless and would come to school and bathe and get ready. They shared their experiences.
These are sixth graders, seventh graders who shared experiences of such brutal physical harm. But the reason they were able to do that is because of SEL, because we took time out to sit with them in the library and just talk about Harry Potter, just talk about a book, just talk to them how my day is going. Why did I have a little breakdown earlier in the classroom? I'm sure whoever's done their B.Ed recently knows breakdowns are a part of it. But because I was able to talk about my bad day with one of these children, they were able to come and talk to me about physical harm that they're facing. And just talking about that helped him so much. And 2-3 days later, he invented an alarm, security safe deposit box. And I think if that conversation hadn't taken place, if he couldn't just, remove some of the burden off his shoulders, that creativity, that inspiration to invent something won't have taken place. So definitely children who come from troubled homes, who are facing a lot of abuse at home, just having that dialogue, equipping them with skills to deal with their trauma and emotions, it's going to lead them into having beautiful lives.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you, Mahera. Thanks to all the change facilitators. Today is a very, very special day because we have a guest speaker now who is going to talk about the power of music and the importance of music in the development of the child. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome Ms. Khushi Kurodi, I will now ask Ms. Nina Nair, Dr. Nina Nair, to formally introduce her to our online audience. Dr. Nair.
Thank you, ma'am. It is with great pleasure that we welcome our special guest speaker today, Ms. Khurshid Kurodi. Ms. Khurshid Kurodi's background in education spans 4 countries and several disciplines. Raised and educated in the UK and the USA, Ms. Kurodi completed her formal education at Harvard University. Together with her academic education, both in the humanities and in the sciences, she has a strong background in the Western performing arts and has won several prizes and awards in Western classical music. She studied classical ballet and music in the UK and in the USA and plays the piano, cello, and violin at music festivals the world over. While representing the Harvard alumni in India, Ms. Kurodi seeded the Harvard Club of Mumbai. She has also provided management and human resource services, specifically leadership, lessons through music and the humanities for senior management of corporations such as Larsen & Toubro. She says the parallels between music and management are astounding. Ms. Kurodi is presently country chair of the Shivya Livelihoods Foundation, an international not-for-profit organization headquartered in London, working for the poorest of the poor through its livelihood development programs. She also sits on several other not-for-profit boards, including Seva Sadan in Mumbai, and works as a strategic advisor and consultant to global NGOs, shaping organizational design, architecture, strategy, partnerships, culture, and governance. A warm welcome to you, Ms. Khurshid, and over to you. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I'd like to say thank you very much for this opportunity to address this forum on the role of music in transforming this thing that we call education. Because I have had the good fortune of having a lifelong formal education in Western classical music, I have experienced personally that education can never be enlightening and transformative until it is sensitive and inclusive of the arts. Music is a universal language, and as Goethe said, it begins where language ends. I am engaging with the term music in this paper today, both literally and allegorically. The discovery of music, mathematics, philosophy, literature, and poetry, the liberal arts. To touch upon this is an extraordinary experience. I was lucky. A classical education and the humanities at large, I wouldn't have it any other way, nor should any of you. Medieval universities took forward from ancient Greece the trivium, a study of the lower division of the liberal arts, grammar, logic, and rhetoric, followed by the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. Together, the 7 liberal arts, with no polarity and delineation between the arts and sciences, I must add, taught students how to learn, both critically and creatively, rather than what to learn. Sometime later, we lost it. I have always found that most people misunderstand history. Is it really about the trappings of the past, dominated by the dead, something to read about and shelve, or rather an extension of what is and that which is yet to come? Perhaps even how to anticipate the future. Therefore, an engagement with evolution in its broadest sense is crucial and critical to understanding present complexities and developing our consciousness. When looking back, we have the advantage of reflection, of hindsight, not to mention outright nourishment. What worked, what didn't, and why? What are the lessons learned? What could we lift and reuse to pave the way forward? This summit, the Global Tipping Point Summit, is about researching the way forward in education. It is about reform and redesigning education. It is about best education practice. Because historical narratives in the field of education are particularly intricate and rich, full of critical data and very telling, I opted not to discard them, but instead to look back to help shape the future. I'm reminded of the name of the famous science fiction film, Back to the Future. How befitting, and the Renaissance, back to the classical age and its rebirth and revival. Miss Dorothy Leigh Sayers, in her essay, The Lost Tools of Learning, presented first at Oxford in 1947, asks, does go back mean a retrogression in time or the revision of an era? The first is clearly impossible per se. The second is a thing which wise men do every day. She goes on to say that we have lost the tools of learning, the axe and the wedge, the hammer and the saw, the chisel and the plane, that was so adaptable to all tasks. Instead of them, we have merely a set of complicated jigs, the combined folly of a civilization that has forgotten its own roots, is forcing them to shore up the tottering weight of an educational structure that is built upon sand. I close the quote. So let's go back a bit and start with the philosopher Plato. He changed my life radically and remains a constant companion. What did he have to say about music, one of the core quadrivium subjects, and the topic which I have been asked to elucidate upon today? Music is a moral law, said Plato. It gives soul to the universe, wings to the mind, flight to the imagination, a charm to sadness, and life to everything. It is the essence of order and leads to all that is good, just, and beautiful, of which it is the invincible, but nevertheless dazzling, passionate, and eternal form. In an era where the liberal arts and humanities are increasingly undervalued in favor of STEM subjects, it is time to articulate clearly the value of the former. Fortunately, the British Academy, the Arts Council, and the London School of Economics, among others globally, have joined hands to rekindle the humanities. That music occupied prime of place in the upper, not lower division through centuries of history speaks for itself. Let me take a minute to walk you through some of the basic syntax and grammar of music. In English, we write above the line, in Hindi below it, and in Persian from right to left. Music, however, is written on 5 lines called a stave. Each of these circles that cuts a line or occupies a space within the lines is a note or specific pitch. The stems, here they are, the stems or tails of the notes and their color, whether they are black or white, tell us of their time value. More often than not in tonal music, the melody moves horizontally across a manuscript and harmonic structures vertically, teaching students to read in 2 directions at the same time. Here is an example of a printed musical score. You have the treble, the bass, the time signature, the key signature, and each measure or bar is a collection of notes in specific time. Rhythm, meter, timbre, and texture are also essential concepts for musicians to grapple with. And as with the alphabet and language, building notes into phrases, phrases into sentences, sentences into movements, and then complete works of music. In this process, logical structures and patterns emerge, and musicians must be able to decode, decipher, and recognize these devices, figures, and motifs. The theory of music requires a sound grasp of arithmetic, mathematics, geometry, as well as knowledge of algorithms, ratio, proportion, the Fibonacci series, and the golden section. Compositions also belong in their historical context. For example, Bach, he wrote in the Baroque era, and the music of Bach must therefore be played in the Baroque style, symmetric, architectured, and detailed. Here is a handwritten manuscript by Bach, which I scanned into my presentation for all of you to see. Very complex, a little slightly tidier version. Likewise, the music of Brahms, rooted in the structure of the Baroque and classical eras, yet we hear in his compositions freedom from form and design and an intense energy and passion, the powerful, full-bodied idiom of the late 18th and 19th centuries, Romanticism. The study of history must therefore predominate, and a sound and analytic knowledge of historical context, the social and political climate of all eras of civilization, as this reflected in not just music, but in art, architecture, science, and literature, and the making of our modern minds. But we are not here for a music lesson, nor is this a plea to take up the practice of instruments or learn the mechanics of music. I could have told you at the start of this paper that music is all encompassing and left it at that. But I wanted to show you how and why. Proof, as they would say today in a court of law. Sadly, most people, and that includes music educators, belittle the subject like many subjects and relegate the study of music to weekly singing or piano lessons. India, the jewel in the crown, had every opportunity to develop the liberal arts, but it stands guilty of having poisoned its education system, and in doing so has failed humanity. For those of you interested, you might want to research the education models now adopted by Singapore, China, Korea, Japan, and Venezuela. Specifically look up El Sistema. This program is not without controversy, I am aware, but it became a global phenomenon, not just for music, education, but as an agent for social change, social justice, intended to embrace the most vulnerable. All of the 7 classic liberal arts, and that includes serious music scholarship, foster conceptual skills, enabling people to better understand complex situations and work creatively around them. Auditory skills, the ability to listen and not just hear. That includes distinguishing between background noise and music and the sound of silence. Audiovisual physical skills, translating visual information from a musical score into a corresponding musical sound. This is also called hand-eye coordination and results in intricate and finely tuned, precise, delicate motor movements. Analytic skills, I mentioned earlier that music is virtually a department for mathematics. Intellectual skills, concentration, focus, and attention. You must have heard about the Mozart effect. Further, studies by neuroscientists have shown that neurochemical processes differ in the brains of musicians from non-musicians, resulting in entirely different levels of cognitive functioning. Some studies show that musicians' brains are uniquely wired, and others that the study of music promotes an elevated and altered state of consciousness. Of course, there's discipline, rigorous practice, and perseverance, engaging both hemispheres of the brain, thinking both critically and creatively simultaneously. Memory, rhythm and timekeeping, solo performance, the ability to stand alone, courage, self-belief, and confidence. Group performance, the ability to play together. See, for example, the West Eastern Divan Orchestra, where equal numbers of Israeli and Arab musicians come together to perform each year. Confidence, sensitivity, communication, articulation, and emotional expression. Energy, self-fulfillment, and nourishment. Music takes you to another world, a world of unfathomable solace. Reaching out to others to offer relief and consolation. Think, for example, of Dame Vera Lynn and the millions of soldiers she reassured in the Second World War. Developing the tacit dimension in leaders, intuition, a move away from quantifying everything. The liberal arts have the power to transform management education too. Music therapy in medicine, treating anxiety, dementia, and clinical depression. The list is endless. Suffice to say for now that the intrinsic nature of music, and all the liberal arts for that matter, have the power to affect human behavior. The prevalence of music is not new, and I argue for its importance ever more today for all the humanities, in fact, as being totally and completely necessary as we seek to reform education. Earlier, I mentioned Miss Dorothy Leigh Sayers' essay, The Lost Tools of Learning. Please do read it. It made a marked impression on me. Miss Sayers was an English crime writer, a poet and a scholar of medieval history. She said, and I quote, "Although we often succeed in teaching our pupils subjects, we fail lamentably, on the whole, in teaching them how to think. They learn everything except the art of learning." She goes on to have learnt and remembered the art of learning makes the approach to every subject an open door. For the sole true end of education is simply this: to teach men how to learn for themselves. And whatever instruction fails to do this is effort spent in vain. I close the quote. There will be grave implications if we devalue the study of all that makes us feel alive. We will impoverish human experience and the human spirit and lose what matters. Indeed, we will not be able to navigate what it means to be human at all. We cannot allow the invasion of this far from civil world to erode the possibility of a more organic landscape. If we want to rescue humanity, first stop the erosion of values. Teach us to contribute instead of to protest, and create unrestful souls in your classrooms who are ever discontent. Contentment never achieved anything. In our quest to rehabilitate education, we need to give life to education, to teach figuratively and metaphorically, through osmosis, never literally, and remember that the most creative individuals are oft the most difficult to teach. The time has come to transpose and develop a new architecture for learning, abstract, not concrete. We can no longer afford to kill curiosity. You have to want to sing about what you both teach and learn, to crave it, to be thrilled and possessed by every subject and the art of learning itself. Education in its truest sense is not about MBAs or accounts or coding. It must ignite the imagination, the magician of our soul, cheating the ordinariness of the everyday of its insidious hold and power. Education must therefore develop the imagination and teach us to extract from the ordinary an object of passion, to change the dimensions of the apparent, to begin where others end. What we learn in our earliest years must be a dress rehearsal for life, where global citizens and humanists belong to multiple worlds at the same time. The liberal arts, since time immemorial, have deepened immeasurably an understanding of ourselves and the world around us. And music, as Beethoven said, is the link between the spiritual world and the world of the senses. If this isn't education, I ask you all, what is? In conclusion, I leave you now with a performance at the BBC Proms in 2011 by one of my favorite violinists of our era, Chloe Hanslip, playing the main theme from Cinema Paradiso, composed by Ennio Morricone and his son, Andrea Morricone. Sadly, Ennio Morricone died this year in July, and we've lost a master of evocative music. In this performance, Keith Lockhart conducts the BBC Concert Orchestra. And Chloe, remember I spoke to you about the syntax and grammar of music, bars and measures, reading the score, both horizontally and vertically? Well, after all that, in the end, believe it or not, you must leave everything behind. Play above and beyond the bar lines, play in the round. Nothing matters anymore except the music itself. We have to move beyond time and space. Here's Chloe in this most liquid of all performances, if we could please have her video.